Hello everybody, we are now done with the remedial instruction and reading. Congratulations. And right now we are going to proceed into the remedial instruction in listening. Under this is the remedial, factors affecting students' listening comprehension. So, but in this discussion we are just going to focus into the internal factors affecting students' listening comprehension. So listening comprehension is influenced by various internal or learner-based factors which shape how students receive, process, and understand the spoken input. So identifying the certain factors allow teachers to design targeted remedial instruction that directly addresses learners' weaknesses and maximizing learner outcomes. So let us proceed with the certain internal factors. First up, we have language proficiency. So what is language proficiency? First, so this includes phonetics, phonology, grammar, and vocabulary knowledge. So it has something to do with their phonological knowledge, their syntactic knowledge, as well as their lexicon knowledge. So what are the certain issues? First up, we have difficulty in distinguishing similar sounds, like for example, from sheep to sheep. So they can't able to differentiate between the two. When they hear those certain words, they think that it is similar. Like recognizing stress, like for example, contract from contract. Like a student may find themselves difficulty in distinguishing between the two, or intonation and connected speech, or anything that has something to do with those. So what are those grammar limitations or their syntactic limitations? First up is the inability to process sentence structures during real-time listening. So they may find themselves really have difficulty on processing sentence structures. Like for example, the modifiers has been really scrambled up, the nouns, any parts of speech has been really scrambled in their minds. And yeah, anything that has something to do with the syntax. So what are those vocabulary gaps or their lexicon gaps? Failure to understand keywords causing breakdown in comprehension. One of the example is inability to recognize the certain keywords. They can't able to cope up with to recognize the certain key terms with this in the certain discussion. So like for example also is anything that has something to do with hyphenated words. If a teacher uses hyphenated words, or maybe it's just quite subjective. Hyphenated words, it depends on how a student really perceive that certain word. If it's difficult, then maybe they are maybe for them it is hyphenated words, but it depends. It really depends on the lexical knowledge of certain students. But yeah, but also hyphenated words really affects the listening comprehension of a certain child. So what are the instructional application or certain considerations as remedial teacher? So we should use minimal pairs and explicit vocabulary pre-teaching and connected speech training and graded listening materials. So those are considerations with and as a remedial teacher. So to address the certain internal factor or the language proficiency factor on listening comprehension. So next up is we have the background knowledge or schema. So we are familiar with the certain theory, which is I forgot this about the add one, that we should have background knowledge to accommodate a new topic or idea. So a student may find themselves really have this arduous situation, or find themselves in an arduous situation where they have uh, they are experiencing difficulties on, accommodating new ideas or absorbing new ideas, because they have no such background in it. Yeah. So prior knowledge about the topic, culture, or situation highly aids comprehension. So that's it. So if you have the certain already have this background knowledge of certain thing, then new ideas are be easily accommodated or um, received. So students with limited schema struggle to infer meaning or follow the flow of ideas. Cultural references or unfamiliar context increase cognitive load. So a student may find themselves overwhelmed, or overstimulated by the certain unfamiliar, or they feel alienated with this new ideas, new things. So what are those instructional implications? So as a remedial teacher, so we should activate a schema before listening through brainstorming, visuals, context setting, and short discussion. So we should able to have a schema or a pre activation of schema, for the certain students. So another internal factor is the motivation and attitude. So listening engagement is strongly influenced by learners' interest and perceived value of the task. Of course, motivation has really is a factor. If students have this certain motivation or attitude, on a certain discussion, or yeah, of course the engagement is really also um, could be seen, right? So if engagement is being seen, then of course comprehension might be perceived later on. So low motivation leads to poor attention, minimal participation, and weak strategy use. Of course, if the students is not motivated, of course they lose interest, and it um, it leads to poor attention, of course, and minimal participation, as well as anything that has something to do with weak strategy use. So positive attitude increases persistence and comprehension. So students should, of course, they should be able to be active, um, to 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 comprehend, or to really gain new ideas, ganon. But if a student is not, participating enough, or they're not persistent, they are not that active, then maybe learning might be difficult for them, or yeah. So what are those instructional implications? So use relevant topics, student choice, positive reinforcement, and visible progress trackers. Actually, Angela would discuss about the how to address the certain internal factors, or what are those considerations. But I just really want to give some hints into instructional implications to address the certain factors. So next up is we have the psychological factors like anxiety, confidence, and self-efficacy. So emotional states directly impact comprehension. Listening with anxiety reduces concentration and working memory. Of course, if a certain students have the certain experiencing or suffering from excruciating emotional pain, of course it would really affect their listening comprehension. Any emotional condition really affects the listening comprehension of a certain student. So, like for example, listening with anxiety. Of course, if a student have anxiety at that certain moment, then it would really affect how he perceived the certain things, or certain discussions. And yeah, low self-confidence also results in avoidance and poor performance. Of course, low confidence or low self-confidence, yung sinasabi ko nga that a student should be active or actively participate, to, or engagement should be seen. It should be really seen, so that comprehension might be later on be also seen. But if a student doesn't have really have self-confidence, it results to poor performance, and later on it would really affect, um, his or her listening comprehension, on his or her listening comprehension. So what are those instructional implications? So create a low stress environment, of course. Use predictable routines and gradually increase task difficulty. So we should able to create a very stress-free environment, and something to do with good routine, so that a student can't be overwhelmed, or something to do with that. Yeah, they should not also able to, you should not also give them with overloaded tasks, so that their emotional condition not be affected, or not be affected. So next up is we have the memory and attention. So why does it affect the listening comprehension of a certain student? Listening relies on working memory and sustained attention. So this is what we call long-term memory or short-term memory. So students may forget information mid-listen or lose track of multi-step instructions. So yun yung sinasabi ko, that it is an advantage of a student if he have or she has long-term memory. But if a student have or has short-term memory, of course they may find themselves really or have difficulties on understanding, or or comprehend or understanding topics. So short attention spans hinder processing of longer audio segments, of course. So it has something to do with also with the short attention. So a student should able to, just like what I said, should really engage, should really be attentive towards the discussion. So what are those instructional implications to address this certain internal issue or internal factors? To use chunk listening tasks. So it should not be in a big size of the certain task, so that madali lang matandaan ng bata. So guided note taking. So you should not able to speak or to teach very in a fast. You should not teach fast, so that the students could have note taking. And then you should also recall activities and use graphic organizers. Next up is we have the age and developmental factors. So why does it affect listening comprehension? So developmental readiness influences cognitive processing, strategy use, and attention. So if a student is not ready, in the developmental manner, so it really influences, in how he think, in the cognitive process, in any strategy use, and at the attention of a certain child. So it has something to do with the competence level of a certain child. Younger learners require more repetition and concrete support. So this is not a stereotype people, but younger learners or those students on a lower level, may find themselves, really, have difficulties in understanding, what you are trying to teach. So you should able to have, to repeat and repeat and repeat, so that the students can able to cope up, or to can able to recognize what you said, So, and of course, this has something to do with the concrete support, to that certain child. So older learners may have stronger inference skills but fixed habits. So this is not the stereotype, of course. Please. So if a student is already mature enough, then it is an advantage because they have stronger inference skills and fixed habits. So teaching, or for them, listening would be just easy for them. So what are those instructional implications? So match tasks to developmental level and explicitly teach listening strategies. Of course, as a remedial teacher, so you should match and know what level they are, on your instruction, okay? So, and explicitly teach, listening strategies to accommodate the certain students or the certain need. So next up is we have gender and individual differences. So gender and individual differences has also something to do with the listening comprehension. So why is it? So gender itself is not a deterministic factor, but individual preferences and learning styles vary. So gender is not really that deterministic factor, but of course, as a girl or as a boy, has something to do with, and as a boy we have preferences, or as a girl we have also preferences, or any gender, have the certain preferences, and the certain preferences really affects how a student understand things on, and due input, ganon. So a girl may find it difficult for them to, to cope up with, with masculine topics, like for that. So also for the boys, they may find themselves arduous into such topics where has something to do with more feminine things, or part of the LGBTQ, they may find themselves really, have difficulty on, on topics where has something to do with feminism, with something to do with more masculine, or more anything that would be, that it could be unrelated at the certain topics. So next up is we have what are those instructional implications? So use inclusive materials, varied accents and voices, and differentiated instruction. So we should have this inclusive materials, and try to consider your accent and voice, not to to accommodate really this certain differences or preferences of the students, and also the differentiated instruction, of course, also to accommodate the individual needs or individual differences of the students. So next up is we have the aptitude. So what we mean about aptitude, it is the natural learner tendencies such as phonemic sensitivity, pattern recognition, and memory strength. So it has something to do with the natural skill of a certain student. So as other students may have the certain natural skills like from phonemic sensitivity, like yung estudyante na which is really can able to really recognize different types of sounds, different sounds, and they can able to discriminate that, phonologically. And also students have, maybe has natural really has this natural skills. So yon, so it adds, towards listening comprehension. But how about those students which doesn't have, or doesn't have the certain natural skills? Actually, everyone has natural skills, but as a remedial teacher, what we should only do is, conduct. Um, address the certain weaknesses of of a certain child. So you should only fill up the certain gaps. Hindi naman kailangan na kailangan lahat sila magagaling, or lahat sila merong natural skills, or they really had, exceeding skills. But as a remedial teacher, we should only focus with those weaknesses, right? And or the certain gaps. And of course, if a student doesn't have this, natural skill, that aids to their listening comprehension, then try to fill that certain part, as a remedial teacher, because that's our job, to do that. So conduct diagnostic assessments to determine strengths and weaknesses, then tailor the instruction. So yun yung sinasabi ko, that just recognize the weaknesses and try to address that, or try to fill up the certain weaknesses. So the last one is the physiological factors. So of course, physical condition, or the condition of your physical body significantly affect, could significantly affect listening performance. Like for example, a student have hearing problems. Of course, it is a physiological factor, that affects his or her listening comprehension. Or a student with fatigue or lack of sleep, of course, it affects, how he would perceive the certain discussions, because of course there's this excruciating pain that he experiences. So our illness or medication effects, yun, anything that has something to do with the physical body, or physical conditions. So what are those instructional implications? So check for hearing issues, ensure good classroom acoustics, and schedule difficult tasks when students are most alert. So actually, we're not doctors, to really examine the physical body of a certain student, but just try to consider those certain factors, that has something to do with their physical body. Try to recognize those, and like about hearing issues, or kung may sakit yung bata, or anything that has something to do with their body. Try to consider them, so that they could really cope up with the discussions. So that's it. Those are the internal factors that may affect the listening comprehension of a certain student. So I hope you learned something about this discussion, and yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.